This session is on sustaining a CHAMPS implementation. And we're very excited that so many people have signed up to join us for this. And a little bit later, I'm going to introduce you to a colleague from a district who has been implementing CHAMPS for over 15 years at this point. And hugely exciting to have her joining us to help with the details of what does it take to sustain an initiative of this type over that many years. Let me start with just a couple of housekeeping things, though. First of all, there is an opportunity, if you wish to ask questions. And you'll notice there's a chat box down at the bottom of your screen. And if you type a question into that, or a comment, or an idea that you might even want to share, if you type that in, somebody from my staff is going to be monitoring those as we go through the session this afternoon. And in our last bit of time together, we'll go ahead and take as many of those questions as possible. And if there's some common questions, she'll try to lump those together so that we take the most common questions first. But anything that I say or that my friend and colleague Laura Klubert says, feel free to jot us a question. Also, we are going to be giving away a free iPad. If you feel like tweeting something during our time together, which we would actively encourage you to do, and this, by the way, is my staff's desperate effort to try to move me into the 21st century. But if you do want to tweet a quote that you hear from either me or Laura, an idea, or if you have an implementation idea that we don't bring up that has been effective in your district, send a tweet. And the tweets should be #classroom management being one word, no spaces, @ Safe Civil School, and that text will periodically appear on the screen to just remind you. And we would love to get some interaction going with this, so we'll appreciate your help with that. And in our last couple of minutes together, we'll identify just one of the ideas, quotes, etc. that somebody brings up, and the iPad will go to that person. We'll announce that right at the end. By way of getting started, let me give you a little bit of a sense of the wonderful range of job roles that have signed up to be with us this afternoon and or to listen to the recording later. I was really excited in looking at first of all, the number of people who signed up, but the category of job role that is the most common is principals and assistant principals, building level administrators. And in talking about implementation, that is going to be one of the things that will come up over and over and over again, is for an implementation to maintain itself, the building level administration has to be on board. And so it was just thrilling to see that that was the biggest group of individuals who signed up. The next biggest group is district level administrators, executive directors, coordinators, supervisors, etc., from staff development departments, curriculum departments, student support departments, psych services departments, special ed departments, and so on. And district level commitment is another key part of what has to be done to keep any initiative going. But of course, what we're talking about here is Safe and Civil Schools and CHAMPS in particular. The next biggest group that we had was school psychologists, and again, just a wonderful group to have joining us. Just came off of being at the National Association for School Psychologists, and school psychologists have truly been instrumental around the country at identifying evidence-based practices, but then when finding them, being support systems within buildings. Beyond that, the next biggest group was teachers, special ed teachers, general ed teachers, teacher supervisors, teacher coaches, etc. And then some smaller numbers, but we had counselors, social workers, MTSS facilitators at the building level, and so on. So a wonderful variety of people, but the variety of job roles that we had really was an honor to me to look at that list and have you joining me for this afternoon, because it really takes all of those job roles to sustain this initiative. So let me get started by trying to frame, for any of you who are less familiar with CHAMPS and how that fits in with the other Safe and Civil Schools material, let me try to do a fairly brief orientation. And those of you who already know a lot about CHAMPS and Safe and Civil Schools, I hope maybe this can give you some additional talking points for keeping it going, and I'll try to make this brief enough that it's not overly repetitious. But what I'd like to start with is that CHAMPS is not a program. CHAMPS is an approach, and you'll find, and you'll perhaps even find it in this hour, even I will sometimes talk about the CHAMPS program, but I'm trying to change my language on that because people tend to think of a program as something that you do step by step, I must do this program. Well, CHAMPS is really just a framework. It's a framework for what are the decisions that teachers need to make about their classroom that make sure that the classroom management approach fits with what we've learned from a vast array of research literature on the psychology of behavior, 50 years of research on good classroom management, 20 to 30 years of good research on school-wide discipline. We know a lot now about what effective teachers do and what less effective teachers may not do. CHAMPS is an attempt to articulate that as a set of planning steps and implementation steps and problem-solving steps in order to have a positive impact on behavior. And CHAMPS is also paired with discipline in the secondary classroom. Again, for those of you who are less familiar, discipline in the secondary classroom is basically CHAMPS for high school, although in a lot of districts that we have the privilege of working with, for example, Wichita, Kansas is a district-wide CHAMPS discipline in the secondary classroom district. And Wichita uses CHAMPS for their framework at the elementary level and uses discipline in the secondary classroom for their framework in both their middle schools and their high schools. But those combined are basically then a district-wide classroom management approach. Now, two other pieces that I want to kind of frame that make the bulk of what Safe and Civil Schools does is there is another approach or program, here I go, called Foundations, which is the school-wide discipline piece, the base level of what we need to try to establish throughout the entire school. CHAMPS and discipline in the secondary classroom rests on that school-wide foundation, and the classroom level piece gives tremendous discretion for teachers to individualize their approach within their own room. So a contrast to that. Dress code cannot be an individual teacher's decision. If you have a dress code, that needs to be school-wide, because you would in fact be better off with no dress code at all than a dress code that is only enforced by 7 out of 10 teachers, or 7 out of 10 address it this way, 3 out of 10 address it this way. That gives children very bad information about what your school really means by its intent with dress code. On the other hand, it would be stupid to have a school-wide pencil sharpener policy, because teachers, that's a ritual within their own classroom, and that should be individualized based upon a teacher's style, the nature of the subject area, and so on. So CHAMPS allows a lot of discretion, but a good school-wide discipline establishes that there's some things that are in fact school-wide. And there is another language piece that is within this, or another acronym that is throughout all of my materials that many of you are familiar with, and it's the acronym STOIC. And STOIC is an acronym for problem solving, and it rests within that foundations piece, it rests within that classroom level piece. And STOIC is an acronym for structure the environment for success, teach expectations with clarity, repetition as necessary, and inspiration, like a great basketball coach will do. Observe student behavior, supervise, monitor actively, and while you're observing, interact positively, build relationships with kids, greet them so they feel welcome to the school, welcome to your individual classroom, and part of the I is meaningful, age-appropriate, specific positive feedback. And then the C of STOIC is correct misbehavior, calmly, consistently, immediately. So that's the problem solving. Anytime behavior isn't going what we want it to be, whether it be school-wide in the cafeteria, whether it be within cooperative groups in my own individual classroom, or it would be with this individual student, Zach, STOIC, structure, teach, observe, interact positively, correct calmly, is the framework for thinking about how can I manipulate all the key variables to try to have a positive impact on students. And really, when we're talking about sustainability, we're going to be focusing predominantly on CHAMPS, but because Alief and many other districts that we had the privilege of starting with 15 or 16 years ago, Long Beach, California, Duval County, Jacksonville, Florida, still 15 years later, this is district-wide, they actually combine foundations as their PBIS approach and CHAMPS, discipline in the secondary, as the classroom approach. So we'll be talking about really all of those things in the intermix of STOIC, CHAMPS, and foundations. Now, by way of talking about sustainability, There's going to be 4 topics that I want to introduce here and that I'm going to use as the framework for asking Laura some questions about how they do it in Alief, and that'll give Laura and I a chance to go back and forth about what I see in other districts and how they specifically do it in Alief. And the first of those is the vital importance of district level support and district level commitment to safety, climate, behavior, discipline, etc. In the early years of doing what is now Foundations, which I started doing as early as 1984, we were working with schools, individual schools from different districts, usually offered through a county service agency of some kind in the Pacific Northwest. We call them ESDs. And we had many, many schools participating in a 2 or 3 year training model, working with leadership teams that made dramatic, wonderful, I mean truly climate changing issues in terms of their building. And then the principal moved away, whether that was 6 months later or 7 years later, the principal moved away and it was all gone. And here's what we've really learned in the last 2 decades. When there is a district commitment to keeping this alive, you can actually create generational progress in your buildings where even with a change of principle, the good, powerful, useful things stay, and it's now the next steps for making it even better. And without that district level commitment, a building level commitment to this work is always very, very fragile. So I do want to chat with Laura some about district commitment. What does that require to provide that support? Now at the building level, some of you have heard me talk about this before as well, but at the building level, we feel pretty strongly that you need what we call the 3-legged stool of supporting classroom management. And the first of those legs is training in a model. Now, CHAMPS is a model, so this is sort of self-serving, saying that you need a model. And there is part of the power of having district-level support as well, is when it's a district model, it makes it easier to sustain this. But if we have a model that is going to be our base-level classroom management procedure, we need to provide people training in that model. But that creates challenges because once you've done that, once you've trained all of your teachers initially, what about new teachers who come on board? And how do we keep things alive even with people that have had all the initial training? Those will be some of the questions and dialogue that I want to have with my friend and colleague Laura. The second leg is training by itself. There is a wide body of research that says it almost borders on a waste of money. Because training by itself, teachers get back in their classroom and they're so busy and there's so many pressures that they don't have time to think about what I learned in training, and it tends to go by the wayside. So the second leg is good, clear expectations from administrators about how to apply and implement that training. And the way we tend to approach it, in the way we approach coaching classroom management is a book that I wrote with a number of colleagues. The way we approach it in coaching is that principals or assistant principals or supervisors coming into my classroom are not looking at, do I have the details of CHAMPS? They're looking at student behavior and going, is my classroom management plan working to keep, number one, kids on task and engaged with whatever the instructional activity is? Are the interactions largely respectful, and are kids following through on the idiosyncratic rituals, like using or not using the pencil sharpener, at the time that I, an individual teacher, have set up as part of my rituals and procedures? The administrator, teachers should then know, it's not looking at the details of training. When administrators are coming in the room, they're looking at, are kids behaving the right way? So that's the second leg. And then the third leg is, for any teachers who want it or who are struggling, there should be non-evaluative support personnel who can come into my room with more time and less evaluative responsibility than the principal might have. There should be professionals who could come into my room who can talk to me about what variables I might manipulate, the types of things that I learned in training, in order to improve kids on task behavior, respectful interactions, kids following through on procedures. And those 3 legs, training in a model that creates a common language, administrators being very clear about the expectations of behavior management, not the details of how teachers implement, but then support personnel and or peer coaching networks who can support each other in upgrading their classroom management plans as time goes on. So that'll be kind of the framework for what I want to talk about with Laura. And at this time, I want to introduce someone who has become a dear friend and colleague, Laura Klubert from Alief, Texas. Laura, this is so nice of you to join me for this.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to introduce my friend Laura. Have a seat. So, all of that monologue going on, let's talk Alief specifically. Would you give us a little bit of the background demographics of Alief?
Yes. We are an urban school district in Houston, Texas. We are 47,000 plus students. We are 52% Hispanic, 29% African American, 12% Asian, and 4% white. 82% of our students are economically disadvantaged.
And all of the challenges
correct,
that come
and
with
yes,
poverty.
and yes, many challenges with poverty.
82%?
Correct. Yes. 40% of our students are LEP, limited English proficiency. The average school district in Texas has 17%, so that's a pretty big difference.
So you have over twice as many as the
Correct.
average who are limited English.
Yes. And so yes, it's very diverse, extremely diverse. And
I remember you mentioning to me in an earlier conversation 80 languages that you know of spoken in the homes.
Over 80 languages spoken in the Alief community alone.
Right.
And that diversiveness obviously is very culturally rich,
right.
and it's embraced, but there's definitely some challenges that go along with that as well.
And one of the challenges with that higher level of poverty is bound to be high level of transience, correct?
Yes, it's not unusual for kids to move from a neighboring school district back and forth between us. But we also, something that we learned several years ago is that we do know our kids are transient, but they're very transient within the 36 square miles of all of our community.
But what I'd like to start with is that CHAMPS is not a program.
Why we began the
CHAMPS is an approach, and you'll
schools,
find, and you'll perhaps even find it in this hour, even I will sometimes talk about the CHAMPS program, but I'm trying to change my language on that, because people tend to think of a program as something that you do step by step, I must do this program. Well, CHAMPS is really just a framework. It's a framework for what are the decisions that teachers need to make about their classroom that make sure that the classroom management approach fits with what we've learned.
There's a little bit of opportunity for growth, but very little.
Not much, yeah. And so a lot of the movement that takes place then is just that between schools within Alief.
Yes.
And about how many schools do you have?
We have 47 different campuses,
Right.
46 in one program, so 47.
Yeah. And what are your high school sizes? But what I'd like to start with is that
range
CHAMPS is not
2,700 to a little over 3,000.
Okay, and would that not include your ninth grade
Correct.
centers?
Yes,
okay,
thank
so
you.
So those would be grades 10, 11,
right
12.
Right,
somewhere 22
Correct.
to 3,000.
Yeah, and the ninth grade centers have about 1,000 to 1,200 students.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's shift from that, Laura, to let's talk a little bit about the trajectory of how Alief got involved with Safe and Civil.
Yeah, a former deputy superintendent of instruction took a group of principals to see you during a presentation. Paula Conley.
It was actually Texas School Psych Association that I was speaking at.
And Paula recognized that as a district, across the board, our kids at the third grade level were using the same reading program. At the fifth grade level, the same science program. But there was nothing in place for our classroom management. So everyone was kind of doing their own thing. Some doing it better than others.
Of course.
And because of our transient population and the need for that common language, that was one of the deciding factors of starting the foundations. So as a district, we started with the foundations, and it was built on about 10 campuses at that time. It was introduced to the district to campus administrators, and they basically took volunteers. So around 10 campuses came on board. Then with the expectation the following year, another third of the campuses, and then the third cohort year, the last remaining.
And each cohort was 2 years of training in what you call above and beyond,
Correct.
which is safe
Yes.
and civil.
Yes.
It was a 2-year model, I
Yes,
think?
yes,
Yeah.
and we, you provided a great deal of training, and then Susan Isaacs,
yeah.
and we still have a wonderful relationship with Susan, and we bring her in often, along with other Safe and Civil Schools trainers, on an ongoing basis to keep sharpening the saw and keep everything going well
Nice.
in our district.
Yeah, one of the things I want to get to in a minute is what you have done to create internal sustainability. And I love that we still get to have contact with you, but really it is an awesome model of you have built the internal infrastructure to keep this going, and we can just be kind of cheerleaders periodically, but getting to come to your district when we can is always such a joy, because the climate of your schools is so positive and so invitational, and knowing the level of challenges that you have, given the levels of poverty and all that that brings with kids having crises in their lives, you don't sense that being in any way oppressive in your schools. They're upbeat, they're exciting, as are your staff. So just going way back, I actually remember being at that Texas School Psych presentation, and Paula introduced herself to me and said she had brought a team because she had heard about some of the work that we do. And she came up to me at the end of the day and said, we're going to do this in our district. And that was when I was just beginning to think about turning it into a model. This would have been back in probably 2000 or so, or perhaps very early 2001. And because of Paula's commitment, and then also a commitment to start some cohorts in Jacksonville, Florida, which is even bigger than Alief is, 130,000 students, it was almost a little bit daunting, because I had just kind of moved things from being just my own consulting work and some of the products that I had written to trying to turn it into a model. And it was like, oh my gosh, these districts have come on board and said they really want to do it. And now what? Exactly. But getting to work with you has just been huge. So it really started with foundations. And that is actually one question that we get fairly frequently, is should you start with foundations or CHAMPS? And our answer is always, it's kind of where is the biggest readiness. Now you started with foundations, and did CHAMPS training run parallel to that, or was that like in the second year that a cohort might start?
Actually, it was a little bit more down the road. We just the first probably 4 to 5 years, it was really just focusing on the foundations, getting campuses to look at those common area, making those common area assessments, looking at their data, creating their guidelines for success, and truly making those guidelines for success a part of their everyday life, and not just posters or wallpaper, as we sometimes sarcastically say it.
Unfortunately.
You just got wallpaper. And it's lovely wallpaper, but it's still wallpaper. And so getting and even today, the campuses that
there's still variability.
Yes.
There's bound to be with 40 plus schools.
Yes, the campuses that are utilizing, that are showing the highest effectiveness are bringing that language to life. They live it and breathe it daily, and it's quite apparent in everything that they do.
Right.
So then we did have a couple of folks from Alief that came to the national conference, and they did go through the CHAMPS.
Trainers.
Trainer of trainers, and they started with a very small grouping.
Okay.
And then that was just trying to, I think, experiment, starting small, and once again gathering some data. And then my team, which is called PASS, stands for Prevention in Safe Schools. And we developed, actually, we were safe and drug-free coordinators, and that was a federal grant that the district had obtained, and we had some very specific guidelines that we had to follow.
Did that start, Laura, in the very early years of Foundations, so
that
your team was formed to really support those Foundations teams?
Well, actually not. The grant had to do more with just looking at prevention only, but we in Alief have always looked at prevention probably a little bit different than others. We've looked at prevention, certainly bringing in those necessary prevention topics on whether gang-related alcohol, drugs, but we've looked at prevention in the sense of what are the variables that we get to have the most influence on, and that is our staff. Our students and our parents there's limited.
They are.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we get what we get, and who
Right.
shows up are our customers, and we're going to treat
Right.
them as so.
Uh-huh.
But our staff is to empower them and to give them the very, very best training.
Right.
They in turn will influence our customers.
Sure.
And
making sure that they all know
Yes.
and understand that really ourselves, that's all we can really control.
Yes.
And we owe it to our customers to do the best job that
Absolutely.
we can of always upgrading our skills.
So that's how so when the grant
it.
ended,
Uh-huh.
then at that particular time, Paula had retired from her
Yes.
position, and another a deputy superintendent came in, and then another, and Gina Tomas. And Gina, when she started with Foundations, began as a principal at one of our 9th grade centers. So she was one of the first campuses that initiated the cohort, lived it, breathed it, saw the effectiveness of it. So when she was in the position, she came to us as former safe and drug-free coordinators, and then we were kind of renamed, and we were given some new responsibilities. So working as above and beyond coaches with our respective campuses, working with the administrative team, providing a tremendous amount of professional development training for all of our staff, seasoned and new, as well as working with those teachers, seasoned and new, with that classroom management piece.
Right. So just to put this in context, there's 5 of you on the team.
Correct.
District is 47,000 kids, so even though that's a huge luxury, that still has you spread fairly thin. But for the campuses that for example, you personally support, what are some of the ranges of things that you do with and for those campuses?
Okay. I work with all of the high schools, including alternative programs in our campus, behaviorally and academically alternative. So it is going to those campuses. We're rarely in our office. We're on those campuses daily. Going in, observing teachers, oftentimes using the basic 5 form as giving feedback, because it's so concrete, and lends a great springboard to really look at the data we're looking for.
Yeah, let me just clarify for anybody who may be less familiar. The basic 5 is basically within the coaching classroom management book, and it's what are the critical data pieces that should be looked at. And so you're going in and trying to be as objective as possible of collecting data rather than just making judgments in any way about a teacher. It's here's some data, let's talk about this data. So what percentage of your time would you say when you're on a campus is spent in classrooms?
Oh, it varies from day to day,
Sure.
But average, on an average, a large percent, 60 to 70%.
Wow. And so other things that you might be doing while you're on a campus?
So after gathering that data, then going back and debriefing with that teacher, videoing that teacher, attending the above and beyond meetings, which are monthly or biweekly.
Right.
Meeting with the administrative team, pulling offense, attendance, tardy data, making common area observations. All of my campuses have various degrees of start on time implemented. So working with them on creating that, working with campus specialists on conversations I've been having with some of my campus specialists is when when they're planning with their teachers, we're really trying to encourage them or getting them to look at that management piece along with that instructional piece, that we have to do both.
Right,
we can't just do one.
Yeah, you know, I think a real powerful thing about what is part of sustainability in Alief is that you are charged with helping administrators and teachers look at data, but you're also known to be the above and beyond department, in essence, which links. We're not in any way blaming this. We're saying let's apply these strategies in helping them with that problem-solving piece.
The numbers are sometimes less than pretty. They're not always what we want them to be, but we can't possibly initiate or make change until we have that very hardcore data to say, okay, here's where we are, and let's create an action plan of where we want to be.
Well,
and
and
a
even
timeline.
schools that are doing well, there's bound to be at various points because of other priorities or paying attention to other things, occasional slippage. And if you can help people see that data quickly before it's gone too far,
Absolutely.
that also is a huge gift. So even your campuses that are implementing at a very high level certainly benefit from that kind of relationship between prevention and intervention strategies and the data piece. I think that's a huge combination that you've created.
And it's perpetually looking for the interventions. We want to put the interventions into place,
Right.
and so we don't have to wait until something hits the fan. We want to
Right.
to have a well-oiled machine.
Right.
And
Right.
and that has made a big difference.
Just
And
you're having mentioned start on time. We did have one district that was not implementing nearly to the degree that you are, and it's not a district that I'll name because I'm going to be slightly critical, but they did do a good job of implementing start on time and really turned some schools around. And one of the high school principals, one of the teachers sent me the article in the paper. It was an article in the paper that the principal was quoted in the spring as saying, "We have done such a good job with this start on time and tardiness is no longer a problem, so we're not going to bother with start on time next year." I wrote him a very diplomatic letter, but what I wanted to say is that's like saying you vacuumed the rug so well this year, you don't have to vacuum them next year. That's not how it works. This takes ongoing work
Absolutely.
and ongoing implementation. Okay, one thing that we talked about earlier, and I just want to, before we move on, make sure we don't lose sight of it, and that's the power of common language. And something that Matt Sprick was in your district a little while ago, and he was given these shirts. So these are not our props
Nope.
that you brought, but they're ones that we brought. This is from one of your schools.
Budwig is one of our intermediate campuses, which is
Budwig Intermediate.
fifth,
Fifth,
sixth only.
sixth grade campus. Exemplary is our goal. But an important thing that I just wanted to show is these t-shirts have their guidelines for success, which are be responsible, demonstrate safe behavior, only give your best, give respect. Very powerful.
Yes.
And another example of common language, and this idea I originally heard from Duval County, but remember Above and Beyond is safe and civil schools, so Laura, if you'd read
Yes,
what this
keep
teacher...
calm and go above and beyond. Yes, yes. So
And-
again, that is from, I believe, another one of our intermediate campuses, Youngblood Intermediate.
And
Yes.
mention what you mentioned to me about the team wearing this.
Yes,
and-
one of my campuses recently created T-shirts, the Hastings Bears, and so PAWS, Positive Actions with Students, is their mantra.
Right.
And they recently got their T-shirts, and a couple of members were wearing them, and not very quickly, other people came up to inquire, where'd you get that? And of course, the member said, well, you too can have one. All you need to do is become a member of the Above and Beyond team. So it's very good advertisement.
That's very cool. So before we leave district support, I would just like to acknowledge what an amazing supporter Gina Tomas
Absolutely.
has been
Yes.
In commitment to this work. Now, clearly, Gina has many more responsibilities than just this. She's deputy superintendent, correct?
Of instruction.
Of instruction. But she has been so steadfast in that this has to be part of the work. It has to be that melding of good instructional practices and good behavioral practices. And I just want to mention that I think that two factors that you have in Alief are really critical for others to consider in the idea of sustainability, and that is some staff members whose main charge is doing this work
Exactly.
and keeping it alive. You are such
Yeah.
resources
I
to
don't
your campuses.
know, and thank goodness Ms. Tomas had the forethought of allowing our positions to go in this direction.
And finding the funding when the federal funding
Absolutely.
stopped.
When
That
our
can't be
grant
easy.
money was gone, and so you're right, then it was sustaining our positions by creating, in a sense, kind of a new position. And because it does take someone to constantly keep it alive. And our goal was always to make our positions so valuable that our campus principals almost just, would say, I can't do without you.
Right.
Matter of fact, I have an office for you, and I want you to, move. So,
Right.
that's always been our goal.
That's really terrific, and I do know that in that period you had a changeover of superintendent.
We did.
And I had a chance to be speaking when he introduced when he was introduced largely to the staff. But tell me a little bit about why he was committed to continuing this on, even as a brand new superintendent. What information did he get about?
H.C. Chambers is our superintendent, and he came on board about 5 years ago this spring. And when he began his position, he went to all of the different programs in the instruction department and met with the folks to sit down so he could get an idea of what their role. And when we shared our role with him, and at that particular time, we were 10 years of sustainability with a Above and Beyond initiative.
Right.
And he was quite impressed with that. And very quickly stated, as we all know as educators, if you can keep any initiative alive 3 years, then that's a celebration, because we tend to burn through good ideas very quickly in the world of education.
Right.
And so he was very impressed, and certainly even if he didn't want to support it, I think he would have, mutiny would have occurred because
there was a ground
absolutely
level support
it was
at both district level and on
absolutely
the campuses themselves.
the campuses that especially the campus administrators that are initiating well, they're seeing the effectiveness. They're living. We're very good about hiring within.
Yes.
So many of these individuals who are currently either APs or administrators, they were teachers, and teachers and then specialists, and they implemented it as a classroom teacher. So they know how effective it is.
Right. That's hugely exciting.
Yes.
That level of commitment, and really, it seems like there must be some sort of tipping point, and I think you hit it fairly early on in Alief, where all of this work supports itself. We look at the data, we know that these are the tools to help us fix what our concerns are about that data. And I think hitting that tipping point where we have people who are specialized at this, but we have high-level district support, we've got enough buildings where it's going well that it's talked about at principals meetings. Something else that I know that I'd like to ask you about, you are periodically at principals meetings, right? And
always.
Just reminding people, this is a fairly big district.
Yes,
that we're talking.
yes.
And your team is always there.
Yes, my team attends the monthly ILT, ALT meetings, which are basically principal meetings, with other instruction folks as well who support, but everyone in the instruction department who supports the district attends.
That right there strikes me as brilliant, because I see so many large urban districts where the principals meetings really are just the principals meetings, and people almost have to beg to get onto an agenda, and it becomes a very competitive thing amongst departments. The fact that Alief includes all of the key people, and you and your team being part of those key people, is a huge statement.
And of course that keeps that, when we all know better, we can do better. And we all need to know what's going on. And Mr. Chambers has done a great job of making sure that everything is very transparent.
Yes.
Several years ago, as a district, the instruction department created what we lovingly call the red poster, the student success poster.
Okay.
And so that has two foundation or entities. One side is the meaningful relationships, and the other side is the meaningful work.
Nice.
And the meaningful relationship it composes of the CHAMPS and everything we do with Above and Beyond, because without that in place, you can't get to the meaningful work.
You can't get to meaningful work.
And so, the basis behind that, and those posters are everywhere in our campuses, is that when you're making decisions about our customers, you have to keep both sides in mind.
Right. And the embedding of CHAMPS as part of Above and Beyond, which is part of the meaningful relationship.
And it actually,
that kind of messaging is, I think, vitally important. And when we look at districts that have sustained a long time, they do it in a variety of ways, but keeping things alive in that fashion. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk now about the three-legged stool and thinking about teacher training. So initially, teacher training in CHAMPS followed the Above and Beyond, moving into the foundation school-wide work. And it started initially with just some of you offering trainings that I assume were initially voluntary. Teachers could come to or not, or were they campus-based?
We originally had campus-based and district-wide based, and at the campus-based level, we specifically would ask for teachers who were either new or possibly struggling with that classroom management, as well as seasoned teachers. We wanted seasoned teachers to hear that as well, so that they could support. So it began at that level, and then it grew to a place for about 4 years ago where our professional development department works very hard and is wonderful, and we work very closely with them. And so the initiative began with what we call Alief U. And so all of our new hires, and that's new, I want to emphasize a new hire, which means someone
not
coming—
a first year necessarily.
Well, they
it could be.
Could be. But if you come in with 10 years of teaching experience, you still go through the Alief U process. And that process entails of 35 required and prescribed professional development sessions.
Wow.
For 3 years. So there's Alief U
35
1,
each
2,
year.
correct. Alief 1, 2, and 3, 35 hours of PD each year.
Right.
And that's simply based on that, the brain rarely gets it right the first time. We need to learn, we need to hear something again and again.
One's first year, even if you're a veteran new in a district, there's so many just nuts and bolts to learn.
Absolutely.
That much of what you get in the first year is going to kind of go by the wayside.
We've had a few people from other districts who have said, well, I had CHAMPS, and we very politely say, that is great, then you will be a little bit ahead of the game, but we want you to have CHAMPS in Alief. Simply because we're very proud of the work we do and feel that what we're doing is highly effective, and we just want to ensure that everyone is on that same page.
And that because it's a framework, you're not, hopefully a teacher is looking at it with a different lens.
Correct.
Oh, I've done these things, but this didn't work as well as I wanted. So I would imagine what they find once they get into it is that it's worth going through that analytical piece again. How do you spread out the content of CHAMPS across the 3 years?
The first year, Alief U1 gets CHAMPS, 7 hours of CHAMPS 1, which we just really focus on the S and the T of the STOIC.
Okay, so structure,
the structure and the
teach your
Correct.
expectations.
Really focus on that. Year 2 is CHAMPS 2, which is the O and the I and the C. So the observe, the interacting positively, and correcting fluently. And then year 3 is a variety of different sessions that people can choose from that are specific to building that meaningful relationships.
Okay.
So everything from more pieces of the STOIC variable to love and logic, to capturing kids' hearts, to Ruby Payne's work on poverty, cultural diversity, working with boys, brain-based, a variety of things. And because when we present this, we always let people know that everything marries with the framework of the Foundation's framework. You don't have to choose one over the other. They all work well together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that I think some districts misunderstand, and they start implying CHAMPS is our program. And I think what you've very eloquently capitalized on is it really is a framework, and nobody's going to ask you you not to do something that's effective, but we are going to ask that you use STOIC as common language, that you use CHAMPS as common language, Above and Beyond as common language, so that we hook it to that. So it's not 87 different things. It's here's the basic framework, and we can pull a lot of very good things to support that. Okay, continuing on talking about training, what are some things that are done with, obviously you have some teachers who have been part of this for 15 years now. Are there things done at a campus level just to kind of re-energize people about this, and how might some of that look?
Yeah, there's often times where one of us, I will work with my respective campuses just on whole campus, or maybe we'll work specifically with a grade level or a particular group. We're constantly bringing in trainers from Safe and Civil Schools to work with new APs, existing APs, new teachers, seasoned teachers. And all of that decision making is based on data. What does the campus need? And just how are we going to just keep this alive?
Right.
And so it's sitting down and doing planning with the Above and Beyond teams, or we provide, we have our own Safe and Civil Schools mini conference in our district every year. We provide training for all of our Above and Beyond team facilitators, and then we work a whole day with the team so that they can truly do some in-depth planning for the year. We have found that to be highly effective if they can do that planning at the beginning of the year as opposed to once school starts.
And so that Above and Beyond team may actually be aware, and perhaps even in that summer training, that 7-hour training, they may be aware, oh, so our teachers are struggling more with classroom management, and maybe we need to do something on, say, ratios of interactions or something. So that's how those pieces would come together.
We just yesterday, before flew out to come here, attended Above and Beyond team, and that team's big rock this year has simply been hallways. And that is all they focused on. So every single meeting, we're looking at that data. We're continuing to do common area observations, and and we're seeing the success.
Nice.
And because sometimes we get overexcited that we look at data and we want to try to attack 3 or 4 things, but we have found that it's not effective. That what is the
and it's always easy
rock.
if the big one goes well to add in some others.
Sure.
But if you try to tackle 4 all at once, then the big one gets left in the dust.
And sometimes you find that the big rock is not as big as you thought it was, and you accomplish it quicker, and then you can choose another
because the data is always there.
Absolutely.
That says we've still got more work
but that
to
is
do.
really important, and that at every meeting there's always a data discussion.
Right. So one other thing just on the training piece. Mention to me about what you had told me before about substitutes.
Yes, and that was based on data we collected from our climate and safety survey last year, that a lot of teachers were highly concerned that substitutes simply did not have the strategies that they needed.
And just for context for people who are listening, the data shows that kids will on average spend 1 full year of their K through 12 experience with substitute teachers. This is not a little issue.
Sure.
It's a full year of instructions.
And again, that goes back to that piece of empowering our teachers. When teachers feel more empowered and have the strategies that they feel are going to help them, then they're less likely to take those mental health days. And so that goes way back to that foundations piece. But back to
the kind of positive tone and climate that in the Alief schools that I've gotten to visit, you just feel a warmth.
Yes,
and that's going to be less
should
stressful.
be a family, a family feeling. We want people to come to work and be happy that the only good day of the week can't be Friday. Yes, there's other days as well. But our substitutes, so data that we collected is, and what was decided that our substitutes would go through 3 hours of required CHAMPS training. So we do a mini CHAMPS training. And the district was so just felt so powerful about that that they actually pay them to attend. The substitutes actually get paid to attend this training to ensure that they attend.
What a level of commitment.
Yes.
Because again, budget dollars are tight.
Yes.
And to say, we want you to be part of this, and this is our framework.
And they're very grateful.
Nice.
My team presents the training to them, and we often get a great deal of compliments from them about, wow, I have applied to other school districts, but you're the only one that provides this training, and I just feel like I'm better prepared.
You know, another thing that strikes me has just been embedded in this conversation that we've had is the degree of coordination, just as one example, between your PASS department and your staff development department. That obviously is not territorial. It's how do we work together to support each other. I have run into some districts where the people who know CHAMPS and would be the logical ones, for example, to change the subs, can't do that because there's another professional development department over here. Boy, things have to be embedded enough at the upper levels that it creates that expectation of coordination and support.
Correct.
That's really huge. Let's shift gears because time is running short here. Let's shift gears to building level administration and their support of this work. Can you talk very briefly about how you keep the principals on board with this?
Well, many of our principals, it goes back to effectiveness. Many of our principals serve on the Above and Beyond teams. And of course, at some of our larger campuses like our high schools, you know, either they do or their another AP will serve on it. It depends, but just still meeting with them and giving them that data, talking about, you know, looking at what's working, what's not, just having those weekly conversations. I mean, every time I'm on my campuses, and I know my coworkers as well, whenever we're on campuses, we always try to make great efforts to have just a little bit of talk time with that principal. Celebrating with them when we need to, as well as, okay, well, let's brainstorm. Let's try to figure out, and coaching them sometimes of how to, you know, look at a problem with maybe a different lens, as, you know, with that lens of PBIS. And just to keep that initiative going.
That, again, that level of just synergy that you've created in the district, of you being viewed by principals as a resource, who they know that the district is looking at the data of the school and you are a resource to help move that, again, is just exemplary of the sustainability and what you referred to earlier about making yourselves indispensable. That interaction of those roles is huge. Before we take a couple of questions, you get to do classroom coaching, and we talked about that earlier. Are there other players in most of the buildings who might be providing coaching, and are they too familiar with the CHAMPS concept so that it would be embedded in that way as well?
Yes, we began a project specifically with that in mind last year, recognizing there's only 4 of us, and there's 46 or 47 campuses. So we have to empower more people on those campuses, or excuse me, our campuses. So we created a project last year that we lovingly call District Champions and Classroom Champions. So giving them some additional training and empowering them. And so I may go to one of my campuses and observe a teacher and then shoot a quick email to that teacher to say, hey, I want you to go into this person's room.
Who might be the building-based champion.
Correct. They may be the campus champion to say, and they can go in and observe them. And then that's very powerful when one teacher can give feedback to the other, and oftentimes some of these people are like, you know, I was in your shoes 3 years ago, and so. And
here's what I did.
Exactly.
And here's what worked. Here's what didn't. Try this.
And we're just about to start another piece of that, which we're trying to build, empowering our bus drivers. So we're going to start some bus champions, if you will.
Nice. Very nice.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Stay with me here. Let's see if we've got a couple of minutes for some questions.
So Mark is asking, if we have implemented school-wide PBIS and CHAMPS in the classrooms, would it be smart to use foundations to help evaluate the programs and make changes that way?
That's a great question, and I'll go ahead and field that one. Mark, Foundations is very analogous to PBIS, a la the Technical Assistance Center. What we tried to do with Foundations is to make it modular so that if you've already got good things going in your school, we do want Foundations to be such, it's got some rubrics that allow you to go, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, oh, we're not doing this, we're not doing this, we used to do this but have kind of forgotten. So Foundations with those rubrics does create a very detailed self-assessment of what we consider to be the critical aspects of school-wide PBIS, and its links to the classroom level that I'm talking with Laura about, and its links into Tier 2, Tier 3 support. So What I might encourage you to do, feel free to drop us a line and give us a little bit of information about what you've already done with PBIS, and we could probably give you a sense of whether that might be useful to look at foundations as a way to move that work into even greater depth.
Then Anon is asking, Laura, what are some things that actually go on in the above and beyond meetings?
Good question. A typical meeting will have an agenda. As I was sharing, based on looking at data, there's always a data piece, starting typically with a celebration, what's going well, ending, and then planning and talking about whatever that big rock is at that particular campus, and then ending with action steps. You know, it may be breaking off into some smaller groupings where we are about to start a new plan. You know, who's going to take this role, who's going to take this role, who's going to communicate to who. So ensuring that everybody has a role, but that just gives a little bit of an idea of what a meeting looks like.
And really just having gotten to interact with Laura quite a bit over the years, one of the things that those above and beyond teams are doing a great job of is just that idea of continuous improvement.
Correct.
That anything that you're working on, you're focusing your energy on that, but you always have your eye to the data to now what's the next piece that we're going to roll into this and look at the efficacy across time.
Yeah.
And so on. And so I really think that's been a hugely, a part of your success is that you, the district players who are such a privilege to have gotten to know and work with, are going to most of those above and beyond team meetings, and so they can really help with keeping that cycle of improvement going. I see some teams that they'll work on one big problem and go, well, that's done. Now what do we do? And they don't really know where to go from there.
And the teams have facilitators. We don't serve as the facilitator. The team, as I said, has either one or two facilitators. And our job is just to go and sometimes ask some questions or answer questions or give some thoughts. Sometimes bring that data, but usually the campus has their own data. We're just truly there as a resource and a support.
But a further strength of that, though, is that your team is so close and works so great together, and I know this, that as you start seeing patterns, 5 of my schools are struggling with X or Y, you can then go, oh, the district should offer some trainings for paraprofessionals on playground supervision, because half of our schools are struggling with
because
playground.
we can come back, and we do come back, because our team meets on a weekly basis, and then we share some of the dialogue that we hear or bring back to say, you know, hey, I need to brainstorm with y'all about this particular, you know, what's going on here. So that helps tremendously,
Very nice. Another question?
There was a follow-up to that one asking if those meetings are just behavior or if you discuss academics as well.
Typically not academics, typically just the behavior aspects, or you know, the foundation pieces. Looking, as I said, if one particular campus is really focusing on common area assessments, whether it's dress code or what are we going to do about attendance. You know, there's other groups that are going to be discussing that content piece, that academics. So yes, typically the above and beyond is to ensure that we're looking at that management piece. Because I don't even really like to use the word behavior, because we immediately...
It's so much broader than that.
Correct, and we just look at that from the perspective of bad behavior, where we're really looking at the PBIS and, you know, not punishment, but what can we do to increase? This is the behavior we want, so let's focus on the positive as opposed to the negative.
Nice. And that question, just speaking about it from what I've seen in other districts as well, I highly recommend that you have a team like you do in Above and Beyond that is looking at comprehensively all aspects of safety, climate, discipline, relationships, all of those pieces, but that you have another team that has sort of an equal level of clout and administrator support and involvement, which is the academic side. And what I have seen, and I have no data to support this, so if you've got one of your listeners have a team that does both and that's going well, more power to you. But what I've frequently seen is if one team tries to do both and it's something other than a very, very small school, whichever side they get good at the behavior
if you stick
side
with,
or the academic side. That's what they do more of. And we actually had some schools in another district, not in Alief, high schools, where the behavior never made it to the agenda of a full staff meeting, ever, for a year and a half. And then they were puzzled, why are our suspensions not going down? Well, it's because you've never had anything that your staff has had to work together. Okay, I need to head towards wrapping up. I want to thank you so much for joining me, Laura. Truly, I consider
my pleasure.
it
Thank you for having me.
an honor. And let me find out who won the iPad.
We are going to say that Mark S. won the iPad. He tweeted, "Generational change comes with district commitment. We need to create respectful schools for many years to come."
Thank you very much. That's great. And congratulations, Mark. We appreciate you doing some tweets during our time together. I want to thank you so much for having taken this time with Laura and me. We consider it a privilege. We do know how spread thin educators are, and to carve out an hour of your time, I hope you got some ideas that will help facilitate implementation in your district. If you're already using CHAMPS, some things that will really keep that alive and embedded for as long as it has been, and clearly very well continuing to be embedded in Alief. If you're just new to CHAMPS or foundations, please feel free to drop us a line. And one part of what we do is, if you'll give us some information about the demographics in your school or district, we can put you in touch with some district personnel who have been doing the work, who can talk about it isn't just posters on a wall. It really can help change the climate of individual buildings, and as, or perhaps more importantly, entire districts. Thank you for your time and attention.